Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. We are going to begin this semester with a deep dive into shape building with Adobe Illustrator. So let's go ahead and open up Adobe Illustrator and let's hit this little Create New button. And just to remind us, remember that Adobe Illustrator is a vector image program that works with, shall we say, mathematical truths, mathematical like sort of formula instead of arranging pixels. However, when you open up Adobe Illustrator, you are allowed to choose the resolution and size of your artboard. And if you go to, say for instance, mobile, you can see that we're mostly measuring things in pixels because mostly your phone is sort of judged its resolution by virtue of pixels. If it's a Droid phone, if it's a Samsung phone, it's going to be the HD 1920 by 1080. If it's an iPhone, it's going to have its own sort of variety of things. This is a sort of out of date in terms of it, in terms of what we can look at here. Web will also be done with pixels because generally speaking, your websites are set to a certain size. Print, however, is done with points. Points are the unit of measurement that your text is measured in. So 12-point font, that's your sort of normal font for your Times New Roman. In this case, a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper is going to be your setup for 612 points by 792 points. Film and video tends to also work with pixels because they generally measure your different video resolution with pixels. HD is 1920 by 1080. 4K is basically 4 times the size, so it's almost 4,000 pixels across. And then 8K, so on and so forth here. So you can kind of look at a variety of things here. And art and illustration is done with points as well, much of the same way that your print is. So I'm going to go ahead and choose mobile. Well, I'll choose web. I'll choose web, but I'm going to create web large here, just so I can have pixels as my base unit of measurement. So I'm not looking at points and trying to do math in my head because the precise conversion rate escapes me right now, and so I'm just going to create this right here. So with that done, we see this big, lovely piece of paper here, and if we want to see it all, we go to View, and we can go to Fit Artboard and Window, and so there it is. I'm actually going to hold down the Alt key and scroll down with my mouse just so I can see the whole thing. So we did a lot of stuff with Adobe Illustrator last year. We're going to do more stuff with Adobe Illustrator, obviously, and we're just going to start off with some basic reminders on how we use the various tools. And so we'll start off with our shapes. So recall that we have three sort of these basic shapes over here. If you kind of move down this little aisle here, once again, I'm just going to start off. I'm using a workspace here. They always do. They always measure. They always sort of arrange the windows and tools in a specific workspace. I'm using the Essentials, and if you click on Essentials and you still don't see it, you can just hit Reset Essentials, and it'll reset it to its sort of default form. And so we're all looking at the same thing. So once again, we have a variety of shapes. We have our rectangle tool, pretty simple. If we hold down the Shift key, we can constrain it to be a square. If we go over here to our appearance window over here, we can click on our fill. We can choose a color. We normally see swatches here. I'll just choose, say for instance, blue. And if we go over here to our stroke, we can also see our swatches. I'm going to choose just nothing for now. And let's do this number here. Let's take this square and let's copy it. I'm actually going to shrink this down some. We hold down the Alt key and we just drag to the side and we create this little square here. And I'm going to just drag this over here to where the corner sort of fits in into the center over here. That's good, right? That's about right. Okay, intersect these little corners here. If I were to go select both of these, I can probably maneuver my opacity down low enough to where I can see them intersect. Maybe 50%, so that's cool, right? So let's think here. Can we get this to the center? That's good enough. And so once we have that done, one of the things that we talked about a little bit was using the Shape Builder tool, but an easier way of combining shapes is over here with the Pathfinder tool. The Pathfinder tool is usually under Properties. If you do not see this and you can't get it to show up, you can always go over here to Window and make sure you just find Pathfinder. That'll choose your Pathfinder. This is the simplest version of Pathfinder tools here. The simplest right here is just unite, right? So we unite that, and now we have basically a traced out outline of the two shapes we just had. So I'm just going to leave this off to the side. I'm going to change this color. I like this color. That's good. That's nice, pleasant. Okay, so with that done, let's go over here, click on this. You can hold this down and find our ellipse tool. And our ellipse tool here is just, once again, we can draw circles with it. We can draw a variety of shapes with this. We can draw ovals, flat ovals. I'm going to see if I can't draw a circle. If we hold down Shift, we can see that we constrain it to a circle here. And if you have smart guides activated, which you activate those by going to View, usually it's already activated, and click on Smart Guides, make sure that's, you'll see these little magenta lines form. And then once again, we're going to duplicate that shape. Recall, we hit our selection tool, and we hold down the Alt key, and we can just drag this. I'm going to drag this over here, just to maybe to where it's kind of hanging out a little bit above it. And I'll select both of these. And the other simplest tool is the subtract tool, right? The minus front tool. Essentially what that does is if I were to say, for instance, take this and maybe change it to a different color here. We have two different colors. I select them both. I hit minus front, and it carves out a little path for the minus front tool, right? With that done, maybe what we can do is we can maybe create a little rectangle. Cancel. We can create a little rectangle here, and maybe we can collect a little ellipse tool, say for instance, like maybe right here. And what we can do here is we can just select both of these, and the next, I would say, obvious tool is the intersect tool, which allows us to sort of carve out a little space of what's in between. So this is the intersect tool. That's something nice. And then the last one that tends to be used the most is essentially the minus front, but it's sort of backwards. What it does is essentially it just takes out what's basically it just creates a little difference in terms of what we see. So I'm going to create several little shapes here. I'll create little circles one by one, and I'm going to select them all at the same time and just center them all like so. And what we can do is we can click this last little thing here, which says exclude, and what that does is anything that's overlapping between the three shapes will be excluded and stuff, and everything else that's not overlapping will be traced out. So if there's an even number of shapes, I want to say it's going to make everything transparent minus what's overlapping, and if it's an odd number of shapes, what's excluded is going to be seen. So if I were to make another little ellipse here, L on the keyboard, and just sort of drag that in. And then all this stuff, it's going to do something a little bit different there. So, all right, so there you go. All right, so those are the four basic things. We're going to be using those today just to create some interesting shapes. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all those just to kind of get us familiar with all that. And the first thing we're going to be doing is using the ellipse tool to create a little shield shape. So you might be familiar with this if you've done the Boolean game on the method of action, and we'll just create a little shield by creating a little Venn diagram here. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just drag this out, hold down the Shift key at the same time, and sort of pull these side by side. So if we were to select both of these, we can kind of see how they're intersecting like so. And then what we'll do is we'll create a third circle and just sort of drag that down, say towards the bottom there. Now I can't tell if this is really lined up with these. So I'm going to click on both of these guys, and I'm going to group them together. Now if you see this little quick action thing, you click on group, that's fine. If you don't see that, you can right-click on these and press Group, or alternatively, you can just press Control-G. So select both of these, and then press Control-G. Recall that we can select multiple objects by holding down the Shift key, and we can select or deselect. We hold down Shift, select it, hold down Shift, deselect it, so on and so forth. So with those things selected, I can just select all these. Recall that we have this Align tool over here, which usually shows up under the properties. If we don't see that, we can go over here to Window and find Align right there. And this align right here, align horizontal, we can just align all those. And then with that done, I'm going to just select this top group up here and just ungroup this and select all three of these, and then I'll do the intersect right there. So that's that. So that's a little shield shape. I want to add a little something to it. I'm going to get my little circle tool here, get my little ellipse tool. I'm just going to create a little tiny circle at the corner, try to center it as best I can on the corner of the shield. I might make it a different color so I can see it a bit better. Make it red. And I'll drag it out. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just drag it out towards this side here. I'm going to make sure that these are centered by holding down the Control-G, just grouping these together, and then holding down Shift and selecting the shield, and just minusing front. Just before I do that, I'm going to make sure they're both aligned. There we go. Now they're aligned. All right, cool. They're centered. And I'll just minus front. There you go. Cool. All right, so I have this little epaulette on the side of the shield, this little divot here. That's just a little, little flare, little stylization. For this, I'm going to do, let's use the exclude function here. We can do a number of things. If I were just to sort of like drag this out, I could create a little copy of it. Let me just center this. So I select both of these, hit the little center align for both horizontal and vertical. Another way of doing this is to simply, let me just delete this for just a second. If we just Control-C and then press Control-F, what that does is it pastes it right in place on top of it. So they're one on top of the other, just like that. So that's another way you can do that. And I just click on the top, click off of it, click on the top, hold down the Shift button and the Alt button, and then resize it some. Now you see here, if I were to make this a different color, it doesn't necessarily, because it's such a regular shape, just simply shrinking it down gives us sort of an irregular ratio between the different paths, right? Recall that the outer bound, like the sort of outer boundaries of the shape is simply called a path. So in order to make it sort of the same path, but like retracted inwards, we go over here to Object, Path, Offset Path. Now the offset path, if I hit preview, essentially what that does is it sort of makes it bigger or smaller, and it sort of extrapolates the path. You can see this little angle that's at the top getting more and more extreme as we go further out. As we go further in, it starts to reduce. So I'm going to make this, sort of reduce this down. If I get down to 0, basically it doesn't make anything. But this makes a copy of this path. It just changes where it's going. So I'm going to make this -10, -20. In this case, so just I would give myself a little bit of room here. And notice once again the angles are getting a little less extreme as we go further in, because as we get further in, we have less room to create the same little ratio of space between the different paths here. So this is the sort of a superior thing to just making the shape a little bit smaller. So this is the offset path here. And with that done, I'll press OK. And once again, I'll make this a little bit different colors just so I can see this a bit better. I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to click this inner shape, and I'll just go to Object, Path, Offset Path, and it should already have -20, the little preview button there, and there's that. And with that done, we'll just select all 3 of these and hit this little exclude button, and then we've punched out a little sort of rim around it. Now it's still the same shape. Now recall, when we create a path, here's just a path. This is a single path. If we create 2 paths and we unite them, it becomes a compound path, right? So it's not a group, it's its own thing. If I change the color of one, it's going to change the color of the other. And if I double click on this, I can select the different paths here under this isolation mode. But in this case, I'm just going to delete this. So this right here is its own little thing. So I'll just shrink this down some. And you can also you can try to adjust the little proportions of it, but it's going to offset your little it's going to skew your offset here, shall we say. I'll change this color to something a bit better. That's nice. I like that. Okay, cool. Okay, so that's a fun little shape there. If you want to add your own little flair to it, that's fine. Let's make sure you have these little divots on the sides. Make sure you have this little punched out rim here. The next little shape we'll do, let's do a little, let's sort of do a sort of Adidas symbol here. Let's see if we can't make a little Adidas. So what we'll do is we'll just create the first little thing of the flower. We're just going to alt drag a circle to where we see just this little intersect here, and we'll just select these 2 and just press intersect, like so, intersect. And I'm going to just take one, I'm going to alt drag it, and then I'll just take this guy, and I'm going to right click on this and press transform and hit rotate, and I'll just rotate it, say 30 degrees. Let's preview here. Maybe how about -30 degrees? Preview this. All right, there's that. Okay, I'll press OK, and I'll just sort of drag this down to where it's sort of meeting at the bottom. I can just select both of these, and I can make sure they're under the alignment here, vertical line towards the bottom, and I'll just right-click on this, transform. In this case, instead of pressing rotate, I'll press reflect, and I should have it be vertically reflected, and I'll just press copy. And so once again, I'll just drag this over this way here. And once again, just to make sure everything is aligned, I'll align on the bottom here, and I'll just select these 2 guys right here, and I'll just group these, and then I'll make sure they're all aligned vertically, and then from here I can just unite them. And so now we have that little flower sort of thing there for your Adidas symbol, and then we want to make the little sort of cutout slashes in the middle, and that will involve us using the rectangle tool. And I'm just going to create a thin little rectangle towards the bottom. Let's make it a little bit higher so it starts there. And let's see. Okay, I'll change the color slightly. Yeah, change it like red, and we'll just pull this down so make it a bit bigger. Now we want to have 3 little slashes. So that's going to involve us making 6 little copies of this. So I'm just going to pull this up once and just drag this, hold down the Alt key and drag it up, and then I'll just do this 4 more times. 1, call, and then Control, press D on the keyboard, repeats. 2, 3, 4, and we'll just take these out in the center here. Actually, we don't need those. We'll just click on this one, and we'll take these 2 out in the center. And we'll just select all this, and minus front. And there we have it. We have our little Adidas symbol there. Fun little Adidas symbol. Simple little shape. That's a lot of fun. Okay, cool. So depending on how like thin or how fat you made your little leaf to this flower, this little floret here, it might look a little bit different. Your points might meet down here. That's fine. That's not a big deal. But that's kind of how you make this little symbol here. This little subtract and combine. We'll make a little slightly more complicated shape here, one that can be used in a different variety of ways. Let's start off with our ellipse tool. Let's make a circle, and I'm going to Control C, Control F, and I'll that basically pastes a copy of it there. And I'm going to change this to, say, for instance, red, and I'll just click on this front shape here, and I'll just shrink that down slightly there, so we have this little shape in the middle. I don't like this red. It's give me my eyes right here. Let's make it orange. That's good. Okay, and then from there we can create a little rectangle. Now I want this rectangle to be just as tall as the circle. So if I have my smart guides activated, I should see these little magenta lines that allow me to make this as much as as tall as the same thing. If I don't have those, an easy way I can do this is by simply clicking on my circle here. Let me just get rid of this for a second. I'll click on my circle. I look over here under the transform tab over here. I notice that my height is 302 pixels. So with my rectangle tool selected, I click once, and I just make sure the height is 302 pixels. And if I can make it, I'll make the width 600 pixels. That way it's like just long, and I'll just drag this so it's sort of snapping right there. And once again, that should right there, the center. Okay, cool. All right, so with that done, I can always just right-click on, select both of these, and just make sure they're centered horizontally. I'm gonna right-click on this. I'm gonna say Arrange, and I'm gonna say Send to Back, and I'll change the color of this just slightly so I can see it a bit better up against that circle. Now, with this right here done, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a series of rectangles, smaller rectangles here. I'm gonna create like maybe 7 rectangles. So I'm just make sure this is about the same, make sure it lines up at the top of your big rectangle. And I'm just going to hold down the Alt key and just drag this straight down. Let me actually change the color of these slightly. So once again, I'll just drag this straight down. And from there I can Control D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's fine. 9 is fine. So long as it's an odd number. But if you look down here, you notice I'm not quite lined up. I want this bottom rectangle to line up with the bottom of the big blue rectangle there. So I'm just going to pull this up here, and I'll get it a little closer. I'll just sort of pull this up until it lines up with that little rectangle right there. Okay, cool. So with all that done, let me just real quick, let's actually do this number here. Actually, I'm going to, okay, so what we'll do is we'll just click on these guys here, and I'm just going to go through and just sort of start dragging these in different directions. I'm going to make them be different. I'm just going to make them have a little variety in terms of their distance away from the circle. So I'll have this one be a little bit further out, like so. And what we'll do is we'll select all the ones that are like on the top and the bottom, like so. This is probably good. One. So I'll hold on Shift and I'll select every other one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what we'll do is we'll just click on this little shape here, and we'll just unite these. So now we have this this red rectangle. Once again, right-click on it, Arrange, Send to Back, and then I'll just change this color slightly back to, say, this little dark blue, a little bit better, so I can see it. Okay, that's cool. And then these guys here, what I'll do is I'll just click on these guys, and I'll just minus front. Oops. I'll click on the big blue one here, and then I'll press minus front. So now, and Control Shift in the little square bracket to put it on the bottom. Okay, so the last thing I'll do is I'm just going to click on this. I'm going to get my Direct Select tool, and I'm just going to click on these guys and see if I can't just drag one of these little widgets here. What I will do is I'm just going to select everything, drag select all these shapes here. So we don't have these two corners, and I'm just going to drag these inwards to create this little rounded rectangle on all this. So now we have all this, and I'll just select this guy here, and we'll just get my select tool, select the big circle here, this little sort of comet shape, this comet tail, and I'll just unite those, and then I'll just select both of these, this little circle here, and I'll minus the front. And so now we have this little comet shape here. So the more variety you have on these little guys here, the more, shall we say, movement it will have. So there you go. That's a fun little shape, and I can just shrink this down if I wanted to. Maybe not so much that. Maybe just make it a little bit smaller, and just put like on the side. So there we go. No, there we go. Cool. All right. So let me just see what you can make. Let me have you make another little shape here, sort of a compound path. Just think about what it says. Don't use the pen tool. Just use the ellipses or the squares or the polygon shape, and see if you can't make your own little compound path. So you should have these three here. I can put them kind of side by side like this, and then over here on your document, make your own little compound path. And it should just be one color, and it should be it shouldn't have multiple shapes that are sort of overlapping. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file. Save. I'll save this as a .ai file. I'll call it Pathfinder 1. And then when you're done, you want to go to File, Export for Screens, and then just save it to create a little file. If you want to make a little Illustrator file, and once you get done with that, it's going to save it to its own little file. Choose JPEG 100. Choose scale 1x. It should be 1920 by 1080, and name it something like Pathfinder 1, right? And then press Export Artboard. And I'll replace this. And so it'll open up this little document here, and then you'll be able to see your stuff. Right, cool. So this is Pathfinder in a nutshell. We've got several different things we can use. We're going to create some really cool shapes with Pathfinder, and then you, for this one, are going to create your own little shape here on the corner, on the side, and just show me what you can do when it comes to that. All right, very neat. Well, I can't wait to see you guys produce. Hope this was eye-opening, and I'll see you in class.